What you just saw was the intro to Cthulhu Saves the World, the subject of today's video. Released in 2010 by a two-person team, it follows in the footsteps of classic party-based JRPGs. JRPG is short for Japanese role-playing game. They can be described as games that have features which distinguish them from typical Western-style role-playing games. A JRPG doesn't have to necessarily be made by a Japanese developer, as is the case with Cthulhu Saves the World. The most prominent example of a JRPG is probably the Final Fantasy series of games, their main distinctive features being those of turn-based, party-based RPGs. A theme commonly found in JRPGs is that of the main character and his posse of sidekicks having to save the world. This is quite obviously also the case in Cthulhu Saves the World. The game is one of subversion. It takes the expected and adds a little bit of spice and a whole lot of unexpectedness, which is done by subverting typical RPG tropes at every level and employing fourth wall breaking jokes wherever possible. Cthulhu Saves the World is a breath of fresh air in a genre almost as old as gaming itself, filled to the brim with tongue-in-cheek humor. You are the mythical being Cthulhu, taken straight from the works of 20th century poet and author H.P. Lovecraft. Having awoken from an age-old slumber, the eldritch horror sets out to devour the world and strip humanity of its sanity. For yours is a love of all things insane and corrupted. Within the first 30 seconds of the intro, however, this plan is foiled by a mysterious wizard who strips you of your powers and leaves you flopping on the beach, an ancient god turned into a harmless sea creature. It is not long until you find out some of your powers still remain. A hapless maiden is beset by a bunch of slimes on the beach, and it is on you to promptly rescue her. Luckily for Cthulhu, the maiden also has a somewhat disturbing penchant for sea creatures, and inevitably falls in love with her knight in slimy armor, thus enabling you to recruit your first party member. And so the adventure begins. The game's 16-bit art style is quite charming, even if you might not be used to low-fidelity graphics. It manages to somehow pull you in, its colors popping in just the right way and its sprites just detailed enough to make you want to see more. The map is split up into a local area map and an overworld, through which you move between different locations. Random encounters are enabled for all locations, except quest hubs, as well as the overworld. The game is not linear in the sense that there are a couple of optional dungeons to be visited, though you will have to progress the main story in order to unlock new areas on the world map. Local maps have an encounter cap of 25, which means that after you have faced 25 groups of enemies in any given spot, you won't have to contend with any more. This makes getting lost or simply exploring a tad less frustrating. For anyone that has ever played Pokemon will know that the single most annoying thing is getting a bunch of unwanted random encounters, often forcing players to spam repels. But I digress. Cthulhu Saves the World can't be described as a hard game, though there is a plethora of difficulty options available should you want to up your challenge. A lot of the stuff that makes JRPGs, such as the need to regularly heal your party, thus forcing you to backtrack and only being able to save in certain spots, has been rectified. You can save whenever you want or on certain predetermined spots, which will also fully restore your party. The battles are done in a manner where monsters gain 10% extra power every turn, making stalling and grinding through their HP a non-ideal tactic. The game wants you to be done with battles quickly, and the inherent combo system, which has you build up combo points across your characters to then unleash powerful finishing moves, helps with that. If you do end up losing a battle, fear not. In case you forgot to save recently, there's an item called 1-Up, which lets you restart the recent fight. Of course, they are not in limitless supply, so you should watch out. Leveling up lets you choose between new active abilities or passive stat bonuses. Characters can further be tweaked by choosing from an array of weapons and armor. Classic RPG stuff, really. The enemies themselves range from RPG staples such as orcs, wizards, and bandits to things a little bit more out there, such as lobster rats, or for the city that's been overrun by zombies, death leaders, which are essentially zombified cheerleaders. Boss fights tend to be somewhat difficult. If you end up getting bad RNG, for example, you might see yourself redoing the fight. They did, however, manage to include save and regen spots before every boss in the game, unlike in my previous video entry, Hype the Time Quest. Be sure to give that one a watch if you haven't yet, by the way. The save spots, paired with the availability of 1-ups, make the game quite comfortably playable for players of all skill levels. Bosses tend to have a ton of HP, which increases the further you progress into the game, so prudent use of the combo and finisher system, as well as the employment of status ailments, will become necessary. A few examples for ailments would be stuns and poisons, as well as the insanity mechanic, underscoring Cthulhu's heritage as an eldritch horror as described by its original creator, H.P. Lovecraft. Insanity works in such a way that it both increases your enemy's damage taken as well as their damage dealt. So, you will want to find the right moment to turn your adversaries insane, as doing so too early will result in your party getting knocked out. Usually, it's a good idea to stack combo points before turning your enemy insane, thus increasing the damage of your ultimate finisher, with which you will hopefully be able to end the fight. Seeing as regular enemies usually show up in groups, their size increasing the further into the game you progress, it might be a good idea to have a couple of group targeting abilities which function somewhat like area of effect abilities in other games. A distinction has to be made, however, between group targeted abilities, which target all enemies of one type, and abilities that simply target all enemies on the screen, the latter usually being a little bit weaker individually with the benefit of fitting the most targets possible. There are also items to be used in combat, mainly potions, which consume an action for the cost of healing an individual party member. A better and more sustainable way of doing things is turning one of your party members into a designated healer. There are also taunts, increasing the likelihood of enemies attacking a certain party member, or more squishy characters can choose to hide, thus decreasing the chances of being targeted. Another option you have is to unite your party members, which allows for two of your heroes to channel their powers into different ultimate abilities, if you will. Depending on your party composition, you will have access to different options. As you might be able to tell, Cthulhu Saves the World is not reinventing anything in terms of gameplay, though it does make the typical JRPG a little bit more accessible for casual players, such as myself. I consider myself by no means to be an expert in JRPGs, but this game's art style, as well as its tongue-in-cheek approach to the RPG genre as a whole, and its oftentimes hilarious writing, paired with the charming world and character design, made it worth playing in my eyes. Another plus side is that Cthulhu Saves the World was, according to its developers, designed as a bite sized RPG that can be finished in a day or over the course of a weekend. You won't get lost in an overly big world, and progress is most likely going to be steady, which doesn't mean to say that there is no learning curve. I definitely had to think for myself a little bit to figure out the combat system. If this is not for you, there are some resources, including a wiki out there, that might help you. Considering Cthulhu Saves the World is a two-person labor of love, I have to say, hats off to the developers. It does seem as though the original vision was fully achieved, and the team can be proud of what they've made. Among a plethora of different difficulty grades and game modes, there is also one that enables director's commentary, which lets you interact with question marks strewn about the game and gives you a little bit of insight from the developer as to why certain design choices were made. Quite nifty, I have to say. If you feel like you might enjoy Cthulhu Saves the World or have already played it, you might be happy to learn there are a couple more games by the same developer, Zeboyd Games, those being most prominently Breath of Death 7, which is, despite its title, not actually part of a 7-game series, but rather named as a practical joke to parody serial RPGs whose sequels are often not actually in chronological order. A sequel to Cthulhu Saves the World has also been released and is available on Steam, along with Zeboyd Games' other works, Cthulhu Saves Christmas. I have played neither Breath of Death 7 nor Cthulhu Saves for Christmas, so I can't speak on those, but from what I know about them, they don't differ greatly in mechanics. Considering I had a blast playing through Cthulhu Saves the World, I will be sure to play through those too, though, especially as I expect him to be just as fast paced and bite sized as this entry, which makes picking them up and playing them rather inviting. In terms of pricing, the games are more than generous also. You can pick up Cthulhu Saves the World for around €2 on Steam, depending on where you live. Its sequel is currently priced at €8 and 20 cents, though the ongoing Steam summer sale has that reduced to just a little over €3. Cthulhu Saves the World is worth a look for everyone who enjoys games and likes a light-hearted approach to gaming as a whole. The only real criticism I have is probably the music choice, which for the most part is a little bit too unnerving and gamey for my tastes, though it is consistent with the game's fast-paced design and the common music choices found in this genre as a whole. The town music is quaint and idyllic and reminds me of Stardew Valley. I think both creators use the same royalty-free music actually, which is quite funny if you think about it. Anyways, I would like to thank you for watching if you stuck around for this long, and regarding the music, why don't you see for yourself if you recognize the tune from Stardew Valley and let me know in the comments. See you around next week for another video.